Okay, hello everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Steve Thayer. I'm the founder and organiser of the London Web Performance Meetup. So thanks for coming out here to News International today to talk about continuous integration and performance. Where's Mehdi? Mehdi? You here?
Yeah, there he is.
There's Mehdi. Just want to say thanks very much to Mehdi. He's organised everything from the News International end. He works in their what's your job title, Mehdi?
Optimization and capacity manager.
There you go, optimization and capacity manager. So he's organised everything for us today, which is very, very much appreciated. We've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes up front, just a word from our sponsor. Obviously they wanted to get you all come and work at News International, and they'll take you down to 7th floor or 6th floor, and you can see their mission control room, the wall full of plasma screens and all that really geeky stuff that we love. So they're just going to give you a brief overview of what News International Tech is. That's you're paying for your supper bit, and then we'll go straight into our presentation with Mark and Andy, because Andy was the last minute substitute. Cool.
Okay.
Over to Ian. Thanks, guys.
Welcome here to News International, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Do take time to have a look out the windows afterwards. It's quite a spectacular view, particularly as everything lights out, particularly in that corner as you look out over London. It's a wonderful view. I'm Ian McDonald. At the moment I'm Head of Infrastructure and Cloud, but I'm about to become Director of Engineering, so that's why I'm keen and motivated to get some great people to work for me in the software development side so we can continue to build awesome products. Got a few things here. We suggested a hashtag, #C4@NI. Feel free to use that or whatever you want, but if you want to chat amongst each other, then that's a common hashtag. There's no press regulation on that. The Leveson bill hasn't quite passed yet, so you won't be censored or pulled before a government panel. The Wi-Fi is open, no proxies. When you go straight out, works on each protocol, I believe. The SSID is GuestNet and the password is Guest Wireless. All one word, all lowercase for the password. Okay. Most of you know probably who we are to a small degree or a large degree. You'll be familiar with the Sunday Times, the Sun and the Times, but we are now much more than that. We have a whole lot of ancillary businesses which are continuing to grow. We've got the Bingo, Fabulous Bingo, Sun Bingo. You've probably heard the Sun Bingo ad continuously on television. Times Literary Supplement, Sunday Times Travel, Sunday Times Wine Club, and we've just launched the Whiskey Club, which is also all about high-end gin, spirits, etc. Milk Round for graduate recruitment, and Sunday Times Driving, which is I think it's £12,000 and upwards for cars to look at a whole range there, and there's many tens of thousands of cars on there, for example. Okay. So we gave you beers, and he said we're entitled to give a bit of a pitch. So come, we're very keen to come and have you talk to us about coming and work for us. We're trying to totally rebuild our engineering practice, move it forward. We've got some great products out there, market-leading products, and we're actually moving into the next phase of our product design. We're moving into responsive design across many devices and form factors. We're doing some really cool stuff, which Lucia is about to tell us about some of the things we're doing as well shortly. So we've got a real range of development roles going. We've got engineering manager role. We've got principal engineer roles. So we've got the URL there for the website to apply for roles, and we've also got that on QR codes on your seats there. There's a handout just outside of the roles that we've got available. Some of the roles we've got available right now. Tonight we're launching a Twitter account as well, Tech@NI if you follow it, and this will be talking about a range of things. It will talk about some of our vacancies. It will talk about some of the technology articles in the press, whether it's us or other interesting articles, and it will talk about just retweeting interesting things going on in technology as a whole. That's not a print publication or digital publication driven by the titles. It's us as technology ourselves just tweeting about what we think is interesting. And feel free to come and talk to various staff members. There's quite a few people with NI badges on, or they'll say News International as a company, so come have a chat to us. Okay, that's me, because I don't want to keep you too long away from the interesting stuff. So,
My name's Lucia Adams, and I work on the editorial floor for the newly formed digital department, which runs across the Times and Sunday Times. And our main purpose is to really be kind of thinking strategically about what our journalism means over the next 5 years, 10 years, and kind of where we want to be, and really thinking about how we want to get there. So it's trying to really kind of push innovation. We're also hiring, but I don't want to be in competition with Ian. So I thought I would just tell you a little bit about kind of where we are today and how we got here, and highlight a few of the editorial projects that we've done along the way, and hopefully it'll kind of give you an idea of what we're about. I have to apologise, I now officially work for both the Times and the Sunday Times, but it's kind of a recent transition, so all my examples are from the Times, so I apologise for that. So this is where we are today. We've got, I forgot to count how many different forums we're in now, but quite a large number. It's quite funny, I've been working for the Times for 10 years now, and I joined the digital department just over 5 years ago. And the shape of the industry is, you know, I'm preaching to the converted here, but the shape of the industry has changed absolutely massively. I do this presentation sometimes to various different people in the newspaper industry, and I always have to check my notes when I'm talking about the launch date of the iPad, because in 2010, this is what our products looked like, and it was really vastly different. When we did launch the iPad in 2010, we were the first ever British newspaper to be on the iPad, and it was quite a leap of faith. It was extremely challenging for the guys on the technology desk who were having to build this thing without really kind of knowing how it worked. We had 2 iPads kind of bolted to the desk because, you know, there was a massive press embargo. Nobody was allowed to see these things. You know, they were kind of over in this bunker in what was called the Old Rum Warehouse, which is kind of as rickety and haunted as it sounds, and sort of developing this prototype and running kind of copies up and down to the editor to kind of get it where we wanted to be. Of course, around about that time, we decided that we were going to introduce a paywall. Some people refer to it as a velvet rope, but anyway, you can say what you like. But so it was a very contentious thing to do at the time. It was very brave. People were sort of saying only niche publishers would be able to charge for content, that news was a commodity, and that ultimately we would fail. So these were the sorts of headlines that we woke up to when we announced that. Sort of after about a year, really views had changed quite radically, and we got within just over kind of a year and a half to 120,000 subscribers. So the rest of the newspaper industry was saying, we know we've got some big financial problems, and we really didn't think what the Times was and the Sunday Times was going to do was sensible. But they have managed to get 120,000 people to pay. That's, you know, we should probably look at this because we're not solving it through advertising at the moment. So very quickly, I mean, I think the advent of the iPad and the world of apps really changed the dynamics of the industry. It really opened the door for publishers to sort of start making friends with the idea of paying. And so, you know, the fact that, you know, the Telegraph, Mail and Guardian were all able to charge for their journalism all of a sudden was, you know, they leapt at the chance. Of course, the challenge there is if you're not charging for your journalism on the web, but you're charging for your apps, that's kind of, you know, what's the rationale for readers having to pay for that? So I think that's not an easy question to answer. And of course, across the pond and sort of more specialist publishers such as The Economist are sort of definitely in the same ballpark in terms of apps, but the web, you know, they're sort of seeing as a marketing tool, so it's a hybrid of free and paid for. And this is a bit of a boasty graph, sorry about that. In a time when sort of newspaper publishers are suffering from declining audiences, we've actually grown ours. So by introducing digital subscriptions, we've also really got behind print subscriptions. If we hadn't have done those things, you can see the daily sales would have been kind of slipping off, but being able to add that subscription layer has really transformed the outlook for us. So how are digital readers different from print readers? Well, they tend to have an income of over £50,000. They're more likely to have children, but less likely to be married or divorced. more likely to be a student, and the average age is 49 versus 61 for print. So obviously that's very important for us to sort of be capturing a different part of the audience, and more likely to be female. But what difference does any of this make? Well, the really key thing for us is that the change in business model very subtly changes the focus of what we do. Our customer is absolutely key. If our customers are not dipping into their pockets and agreeing to pay for our journalism, then we're not going to survive. And changing that focus relentlessly onto the customer is very important in the way we think about our journalism. Ages ago, I sort of did a business degree, and we were always taught the cost of acquiring a customer is much higher than the cost of retaining one. So basic maths just says, keep hold of your customers because they're really valuable. So how that translates in terms of what we do, well, it's all about engagement. I don't know if has anybody come across a cycling campaign? Okay, one person, great, Ian, he works here, that's good. That's a good start. So basically, this was a campaign that we decided to run. One of our journalists was very seriously injured on her way to work, and we decided to run this campaign. It was really about involving readers, so people were able to write to their MPs, they were able to sign a petition, and it was really kind of getting groundswell behind it. So that's an example of really trying to put our readers within our journalism. They were the driving engine of this story. Some really big numbers here. So we had 30,000 pledges made, almost 40,000 tweets, and an incredible number of letters to MPs. And I think, people talk about, are you still relevant as a newspaper when you have a subscription model? You're not free. You're not kind of part of the free web. And I really think this is proof that that's absolutely not the case. We were able to get David Cameron talking about this, and this campaign had a tremendous influence. And I think that's really what makes me get up in the morning. I'm really excited about the influence that this sort of thing can have. Of course, you can't run campaigns every day. This was a lovely comment from a reader that was under a piece by Matthew Paris, and I can't remember the name of the other journalist now, but it was sort of about armchair activism in Syria. And this reader's kind of saying, he's kind of sitting back and eating his popcorn as he watches the debate unfold under articles. And we've really pushed for journalists to get involved directly under articles and in joining the debate with readers and with one another. And it really adds a level of vibrancy to what we do and makes it really real. And people can challenge the journalists directly. Another aspect is sort of really opening the door into the behind the scenes of the journalism and kind of inviting readers in. And then very simple things like email bulletins, just really using those to engage in conversations with readers and talk to people directly. And then kind of thinking about the way people behave. Again, this is an example of putting the reader at the centre of what we do. And so during the Olympics, this screen grab was actually for Euro 2012, but during the Olympics we developed with our tech team a live hub. And really the understanding was that the Olympics was going to be a TV or stadium type event, but for most people it would be a TV event. And we weren't going to be able to compete with the BBC. We had to find a way to kind of work around the way readers were going to interact with that. So the idea was to create a live hub which would be across tablet, web and mobile, which would basically be your companion to the Olympics. And I think this is a lovely example of a very kind of simple innovation that just recognises the way people use media today, using their second screens to support the experiences that they're having elsewhere. The last example I'm going to show you is just, given that you're having beer, I thought I'd remind you that, let me just see if I can play that again, that the tax in the budget today is down 1p, so hopefully it makes you all feel better. But, it's also doing playful things. Readers need their kind of chocolate chips as well as their granola. So we do really try and engage with people in a variety of ways. So anyway, that's a very quick whistle-stop tour. I hope that's been helpful in bringing things to life for you, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you for listening.
This presentation is called Beyond Scrapbook, which would make a lot of sense if everyone had been to the previous version of this talk 3 months ago, I think it was, in the Manchester Web Performance group, where we talked about how between Intechnica and Channel 4, we were introducing this process on a project called Scrapbook. This was the follow-up that was promised at that meeting, which we're doing at a completely different place to a completely different bunch of people. So that's the background for why it's got this completely sort of random name. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit first about some of the background and the challenges about introducing performance into a CI process. And then Mark from Channel 4 will step up and tell you about his... Yeah, he will hobble up on his crutch and then lean himself against here and tell you about how the actual implementation that he's been working on at Channel 4 for this. So I thought I'd start with a little background about who I am. So I work for a company called Intechnica. I'll give you a little background about what we do, which Mark won't need to do because he works for Channel 4, who you've probably all heard of, which goes to show it's not the quality of your work, it's whether or not you run a major national broadcast network. Yeah. So we are a performance consultancy. We're based in Manchester. We sort of analyse, we'll come in, look at performance problems, performance strategy, and anything around the web or IT performance area. We do a lot of work with Channel 4 around this area. Okay, so one of the things that we look at is where performance fits in the modern development process. I think if we get this diagram up, the lines at the bottom, the orange line is your traditional performance considerations, which is you hammer away at your development, then it's finished, then you think about whether or not it's performant. So we've been sort of doing a lot of thinking about that, thinking actually what you want to do is introduce performance all the way through, the same as we do with QA and the same we do with development. We introduce performance at every step of the development process, which means you don't get to the end and suddenly discover it's really slow and then have to fundamentally re-architecture your entire project, which I don't know if anyone's process that anyone's been through, but it's not a fun process. Yeah. Okay. Does everyone here know what CI is? If everyone knows, I will skip this and go straight on. Does anyone not know? Okay. In that case, we'll a couple of minutes about CI. So the concept of continuous integration is basically around the idea of, as developers, you want to know as quickly as possible if there's a problem. So on every check-in or regularly, we will run builds, unit tests, and basically we'll get problem fed straight back to you if there is a problem with what you're doing at the moment. All automated so that it will happen regardless of whether or not you ask for it. So one of the things that we get asked for a lot from various clients is, how can we integrate performance into this process? So we all like our CI processes, so we're finding out about functional errors almost instantly, and we want to know about performance errors the same way. We want to basically reduce the feedback loop for performance errors the same as we do with functional errors. So here's your kind of typical CI process. There's two sort of levels to this. One is a level that will happen on every single check-in. So that will happen potentially tens or hundreds of times a day, depending on how many developers you've got and how efficient they are at checking in. And we've then got some more sort of long-term things which will happen maybe a nightly build, maybe hourly, or maybe just on demand, but not on every check-in, because the checks you do on every check-in, you want virtually instant feedback on, so within a minute or so. So it doesn't interrupt your time as a developer. You get the answer back more or less as soon as you submit a change. So on every check-in, you'll typically do your normal checks, syntax and dependency. Does this even build? You'll execute your NUnit tests, and you might do your integration BDD tests at that stage as well. And at this point, you can look at some additional testing with quick feedback, and we can put some performance stuff in there. So we can look at things like web page test or kind of front-end quick performance tests. We can even look at very, very limited load tests as well. And then when you get into the area of sort of real load test is in the next stage. So you really need to be able to deploy what you've done to a reasonable sized platform where you can do a realistic test with reasonable data sets. And then you can look at building this sort of process, which is firing up a full performance test and then monitoring the results and seeing what you get out of it. And the tricky part about this is really from a CI point of view, you need a yes or no answer that comes out at the end of this. Performance tests are typically a lot more grey, and they need a lot more human interpretation to get to whether or not there is a problem. And then you get onto areas where as soon as you get onto black and white, then suddenly there's a tipping point. And actually it might be the previous check-in that has taken your page from 1 to 9.8 seconds, and then your next check-in takes it from 9.8 to 10.1, which is over the limit, but actually that check-in has not really caused the problem, it's the one before. So there's a lot of complexity around that area, and I won't go into too much detail because I know Mark covers quite a lot about how the decisions he came to on this. So, have a debate about this. What is the main challenges to actually stopping more companies having performance as part of their CI process? Because we deal with a lot of companies who are either trying to introduce this or thinking of introducing this, struggling, and we're brought in to help them on it. So is it a process problem, or is it a matter of the tools? And I'll try and articulate both sides, and then you can make your own mind up about which side it is. So is it process, and is it because it is quite hard, and it's where do we start with this, and what do we use as the thresholds, and how do we know if it's success or failure? Can we even set KPIs against something that's not actually fully developed? Can you set realistic KPIs in advance that you actually want to set as a rejection state for your build? Is it just because there's not many people are actually up and running with this, so there's not all the frameworks out there, so you're going to have to build something yourself and create something yourself? And is it because you want to do performance testing at the end where everything's all built and you can actually test it properly? Doing it earlier on will be very brittle, and you'll be having to re-script all the time. So is it process or is it tools? Because you can't deliver CI properly without the right tools. And at the moment there's nothing really available off the shelf that does this. None of the CI tools are doing this out of the box. So you're going to need all sorts of bespoke integration. You're going to be using APIs, and you're going to need to automate it. And then you're thinking about comparisons, and can your tools then compare one test against another? So, what do you reckon? Who reckons it's a process issue? Who's going for tools? Yeah. Who's going because it's just hard? Yeah. I think it was actually process was the winner there. Okay. But it's an interesting one, and I think Mark's right. It's probably a bit of both. Okay, so that's the end of my section. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to take them, or we'll take questions at the end. So if anyone's got anything they want to ask now. Okay, in that case, over to Mark for just a quick description of how they solve these problems at Channel 4.
Right, that's me. I'm online QA manager at Channel 4. Previously at ASOS, which was where I developed my relationship with Intechnica, I was looking to find a performance service provider who had a view of starting performance testing early in the cycle, and I put out an RFP, and Intechnica were the ones that actually had a convincing solution. So when I moved to Channel 4 and I had a similar issue, I I brought them along with me. I'm not working quite so much with them now because I have my own in-house capability, but they're still working it strongly with other areas of Channel 4. So, right. In fact, I'll go back actually because I want to hey, go the other way. Scrapbook that you saw at the very top of the first slide. We did that work with Intechnica, and where we actually got to with that was we had a framework where overnight we could build a full replication of production in EC2. We could deploy the latest successful build to that. We could fire up an injection infrastructure in the cloud. We could then run a performance test at full volumes, collect the results, collate them, analyse them, and give us some form of answer in the morning. We did that using an enterprise tool called Facility to Forecast and an injection infrastructure tool developed by Intechnica called Traffic Spike, which worked very, very well. But moving on from Scrapbook, we had certain issues with that, which I'll come to later. Right, why would you want continuous performance testing? Now, this is my slide deck is tacked onto the back of Andy's, so there's a bit of repetition here, and I apologise. But performance is at least as important as functionality in a lot of sites, and I would say pretty well anything that's going out to customers who aren't part of your business, I would say it's more important. And performance breakages can be a lot more challenging to fix. They tend to be, the issues tend to be a lot more technical rather than just saying, oh, it doesn't work like it says it should. And build failures in pure CI build, stopping those performance errors getting actually into the code base, and short feedback loops are the best ways of stopping that happening. You want to always keep your code base clean. But do you actually want pure CI testing? Pure CI performance testing means you decide what your performance limits are. If you don't meet those, that build fails. You don't get a check-in. Andy alluded to the fact that can be very disruptive. I would suggest in the early stages of a project, no, you probably don't. You're probably better off taking sample builds and running it through and just building up a historical picture of what your performance is. The other thing you'll meet is resistance to the concept of failing builds for reasons which are non-functional. Typically, developers will say, well, it's performance, it's not functional, we'll fix it later. And sometimes the testers will say, well, I want that check-in. But again, I think if you're thinking about CI, you want to keep your code clean. That's why you have the concept of failing builds in the first place. I see no difference in terms of code quality between functional errors and performance errors. So on stable products, you certainly can have early identification of performance issues. And I would say yes, I think you should be looking to introduce CI performance testing as soon as it's practical to do so on a project. Now, certain challenges that we met after we finished the Scrapbook project. If you want to do this, every project needs its own tooling. You can't share. We use for this. We have a couple of instances of Facility Forecast. We have a Google Calendar, and we have people fighting over it to do in-development testing and pre-release testing. We have contentions. We have people not being able to test when they want to, and that's without even getting to CI testing. So when you get to CI testing, when you want to be able to do it continuously or anytime you want to without worrying about it, you either have to put your hand in your pocket, persuade the business to invest in that tooling for every project, which can get very expensive. Now companies are looking at CI performance testing as a solution. I think the licensing models are beginning to creak a little bit here, because whereas in the old days you could spend 150 grand on load runner and pass it around the company, you can't spend sort of 600 grand for 4 different projects to use it all the time. So I think you're going to see the licensing models changing so that more instances of the tool will be much less of an overhead. But Channel 4 is committed to open source tooling. They don't want to spend the money. So the other option is to go open source.
Not quite sure those things are the same thing. I mean, just don't
Yeah, well, they want to use the open source, and it's not. And let's get this clear. I mean, often going the open source way is ultimately more expensive, because whatever you save on license costs, you spend on the extra development costs and technical support you need to actually get the solution you want. I prefer open source tools because they're technically challenging and they're more interesting, and you can do what you want. You don't have to actually follow what the tool tells you to do. So, my requirements for integration testing, which I gave to Nick here, who's my performance test lead, was I wanted it to integrate with a CI tool. In our case, it was always going to be Jenkins, because that's what we were using already. Wanted the ability to fail builds on transaction level on the normal things such as percentile response times, error rates, throughput, but also on a number of front-end metrics, because we have a lot of issues with poorly designed front-end pages on a lot of our sites because there's not been a lot of control, and a lot of our performance issues aren't load issues, they're actually design issues on the front end. So to get that front-end instrumentation, so we could see what was going on obviously, and collation of the run across all the injectors, all that data into something meaningful that we could understand at the end of a run. And with pure CI, you won't be looking at that at the end of every run because it happens all the time, but you will want a historical record, an audit trail of how your performance has gone. Because alluding to what Andy said, check-in before last could have taken you could have a warning level of a 3-second response time. It's not an important page, you want it to be under 3 seconds. If it goes over that, you don't want to fail. If it goes over 10 seconds, you do want to fail. So it could be running at 3.5 seconds and be in that warning level and on the back burner to actually address that. Checking before takes it to 9.5 seconds. The last check-in just knocks it over that limit. You want that historical trail, because the developer who did that last check-in is going to want to prove that they didn't do the big breakage. So they have to have that information there so they can go and blame someone else. So we help that blame culture. Well, we have no blame culture whatsoever, but you need to be able to understand where your issues arose. Now, full volume testing, because CI testing, your tests can only run very quickly. They're not going to run on a full environment. They can find certain things that you decide it's valuable to look at. You can learn over time what things are important, what things should ring the alarm bells, and put your metrics in there. But they're only going to find a subset of stuff. On top of that, you want to be doing regular full volume testing. On Scrapbook, we were doing it overnight. If you're in the cloud, which we are, you can potentially do it as much as you want. Nick typically runs his tests 4 times a day. Not necessarily to full volumes, but going forward, I think that's the model we'll have. We'll run a full volume test on a load model that represents production load on another instance of a production environment, so we can find out what would really happen in the real world. So for that, you need scalability to enterprise loads. You also need an injection infrastructure that can handle those loads, and you want real-time monitoring so that you can sit there and see what's going on as the tests are running rather than wait until the end. So they're the requirements. So as I said, we went the open source route. So the primary tools we've got are Jenkins, already sitting there doing our CI management. JMeter, partly because Oliver Lloyd, who is somewhere in the room, works for News International, had already, he had already cracked the problem of getting JMeter to scale to production loads by putting it all up in the cloud and making it horizontally scalable and breaking the master-slave model and the enormous JVM problems that JMeter typically had. So that made JMeter a viable tool to use as our starting point. Obvious tool to use because it's so well known and stuff like that. And on top of that, because as I said before, the front end issues were very important to us, we chose web page test as well. We're also using Splunk free version, which only gives you a certain amount of 500 megabytes of data a day. So I think Nick's got 2 Splunk servers up and running, but we're moving to Greylog, which is an open source similar thing to do our monitoring. Typically that will be on the live systems, but we can still use it for our tests as well in the development space. So that's our basic tool set. Now the front-end instrumentation, this is interesting because on top of all the normal back-end metrics that you could use to trigger a failure, you have all the time to first byte, DOM content ready, and you load event type. I mean, you can read that. I'll just go down it anyway. Doc complete type, fully loaded, time to title, bytes in doc, number of requests fully loaded. There's more than that, it's just a sample. If any of these are particularly important and you know what limits are unacceptable to you, you can set your Jenkins build to fail on the limits you put on that. And that's very useful. So, how does it work? These slides aren't necessarily all from the same project. They're just nice, pretty slides that demonstrate how it all fits together. Jenkins controls the whole process. That's the starting point. That's where your builds are. That's where you schedule things. That's where you decide how you want it all to run. And it calls JMeter, which in turn calls web page test. That's the front end, but web page test can do all the stuff in the background. And there's a link. We haven't got a laser, but there's a link here to raw page data. And if you click that link, that's exactly what you get, and that's what you need to do the analysis, that raw page data. You can measure more standard things like time to first byte, document complete, fully loaded time. You can trend those. You can set ultimate limits on those. You can do some more specific things here, NICs, comparing uncached and cached and uncached pages and how they're performing. That percentage of errors is a limitation of web page tests. JMeter limitation.
JMeter plugin.
JMeter plugin. So that's not true percentage of errors. The response time is correct, but whenever it fails, it just goes to 100. When it goes above the allowable response time, percentage of errors goes up to 100. So you'll typically see it's within limits and it will be down here, and it will go up above limits and it will go up here. So if we could change that title, it would make more sense. But we know what it means, so that's important. Yeah. The details are out. Put to the project workspace. You've got hyperlinks there to the full reports. So the benefits of using JMeter, and I will go through these because there's a lot that you can do on the front end with this. As I said before, the results analysis. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can use to fail your build. If you start doing this, the team becomes very aware of what is good and what is bad on the front end. If you've got loads of third-party calls before your document complete, you're relying on other sites to perform, to actually get to the point where your site is usable. He said that the graphical representation of cached and uncached performance, you can see what effect your caching is having. Click through from Jenkins to the test run results. Go to detailed XML data from web page test. Detailed test analysis for the front end. You can integrate with Google page speed and various Chrome stuff, and also various Internet Explorer stuff you can utilize. Highly configurable. You can have just sort of granular tests. You can do workflows, so you can have user journeys running when you're putting all the load on and see how they work. Obviously, you can see how it works in lots of different browsers. Different scenarios, you can have them running at the same time, and on different client hardware. So it's very, very versatile. It gives you a lot of information. It gives you a lot of choice on what you can fail things on. I mean, different sites, different parts of sites, different areas may be important, and you have that control. We're only just starting this, so we really don't know a lot of these answers here, but what we do know is we have a lot of choices here and a lot of way we can do things, and over time, and as we get to know projects more, we expect to understand a lot more about what we can do with this. But we know it's there now, so we'll be using it one way or another. So what do we get out of CI testing? Obviously, you get the short feedback loops. So the shortest you get are the ones that fail the builds. So you can have a very short splats of tests, which will stop the code even getting checked in if it's not within the accepted limits. Or you could trigger you could not fail the build, but you could use that build if it passes the unit. In the integration testing, you can spin off a performance environment and immediately afterwards run your performance tests on that. So even though it wouldn't fail the build, if there were any issues, you could know about them as soon as possible. So you can fail by numerous metrics, the more traditional ones and the ones that are available now through on the front end through web page test. And you get your performance trending data, so you can see over time what's getting better, what's getting worse, what your overall view is. And the full volume testing that you stick on the back of that gives you an early and regular view of what your real world performance will be. So you know in advance if you've got something that's not going to work when you go live, and you can sort it out as early as possible. And that's basically at the high level what we're doing. I'd like to just give a credit to the people who have made this work for us. Oliver, I've already mentioned. He had already developed the EC2 JMeter infrastructure that we needed to do this work. And Nick, who works with me at Channel 4, he did the Jenkins integration, the web page test integration, and plugged it all in and got it to work together. They've both got websites. Oliver's put his stuff on GitHub. Nick's promising to put his stuff on GitHub, but I'm making him very busy at the moment, so I don't know when that will happen, but that will be there as well. But if you have detailed technical questions, those sites have all the information, all the code, all the scripting, all the stuff you need to do this, and you could even talk to them. You know.
Talk to them face to face?
Yep. So that's my presentation, and now's your opportunity to ask questions. Anything technical I'm going to hand off, but anything at a high level I'll endeavour to answer or hand over to Andy.
We've actually got a microphone, so if you just want to put your hand up and we'll pass the mic through to you so we can hear and get it on the recording.
I'm just wondering how many false negatives you get where the build system fails to build, but actually it wasn't really a performance problem.
Well, at the moment we're not actually plugging into the Jenkins to fail. That's something we've got to sell to the developers. We've got it all working, and we proved it's working. But this is sort of very much work in progress. So our next argument is to sell to the development teams that there are things that we think it should fail the build on. They will probably be the easy stuff, like we know in the development environment what typical response times is on certain important pages, and if they go beyond that, we'll do that. Or if error rates go up, that's a very easy one to do. But I don't know. I mean, we see a lot of stuff that would fail a build.
Yeah, at the moment I run it in my own Jenkins servers on separate boxes, and I would just keep an eye on that and call the dev teams and say, look, have a look at this, there's something going on. So we haven't yet got to the stage of strictly stopping any builds, because that's just a hard sell actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is our strategy going forward, is to plug it in. We've got everything there now. But I mean, if we were, I would say the project that Nick's working on at the moment would be probably too unstable to make it viable.
Yeah. So I've got a project. I even found a problem today with the JMeter full load stuff, and I call them up and they have a look at it and they'll raise some, internal stuff on things. But even then, they can. And our tech lead said this performance CI is finding issues that functional boys should have found, but they haven't found it. even now, he still doesn't quite want it plugged in to actually stop the thing.
I think as it gets stable, and I think once we've gone live with this particular thing, I think at that stage we'll put it in, because any subsequent work there will be maintenance work. We wouldn't expect to be many breakages, certainly performance-wise, if not functional. And I think at that stage, I think I'll be able to sell it, because they can just not worry about it. It won't happen very often, and if it does, they'll know about it straight away. Getting it in towards the end of a development project, I think a lot of people see it as disruptive and stopping them from going live. So I think that's going to be a sell, because it's not going to be. It's going to be telling them they've got problems as soon as possible. So I see our first attempt to do this will be rolling it out onto a live project and setting it all up. At that stage, you'll also have a much better understanding about what is important and what isn't.
Hi, Mark. Many years ago, I had the pleasure of launching Big Brother Channel 4 site, and the dangers of somehow performance testing a live environment for things like the comments page, when suddenly hundreds of thousands of people start commenting. Have you sort of attacked that problem, a live, functional, data-rich page, and how it performs?
We did it at ASOS, and we're talking about doing it at Channel 4, but the Channel 4 strategy, I think we might do that. That's in the operations sphere, so I'm not directly responsible for that. But our strategy in Channel 4 is moving everything to EC2, and when it's in EC2, it's not an issue. You just put up an exactly the same environment.
Throw hardware at it.
Yeah. Well, you
Spoken like an operation, can
you can put it up for, you could do, I mean, pre-production, we typically do three types. We have three models of load test. We have what we call a cliff face test, which is Davina saying, go to the Big Brother, even though it's Channel 5 now, I do know that. Davina goes, go to the Big Brother site to do it now, and then you get all these people hitting it exactly the same time. And we just hit the peak load, sustain it for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then tail it off. We have a soak test, which would typically run overnight or longer, which will be at more representative volumes. But one of the ones that is actually very useful is running at the peak cliff face test for an extended period, so we can just take a peer into the mechanics of the application and see what's going on.
And is that still using JMeter?
No, at the moment we're using Forecast for that, but we will be using the strategy is to move off Forecast. We may keep it. We've got the license now for particular things. The intention that now we've sort of got all of the stuff up and running and working is to move to Jamie to do that. Mainly because anyone can do it, and there's no contention over the tooling. But yeah, typically, as I say, for the cloud-based stuff, you just spin up an environment, run it for 2 hours. Yes, you're chucking hardware at it, but you're only paying for 2 hours worth, and you spin it down again. So it's great.
Hi, just wondering, for sort of a continuous integration type testing, you tend to eliminate most external dependencies. So for unit
Sorry, I
tests,
didn't quite catch that.
when you're doing continuous integration
Yeah.
for your testing, you tend to eliminate most of your external dependencies. So for unit tests and so on and so forth. We've kind of flirted with sort of nowhere near as advanced as what you're doing, but a similar thing. And in our experience, the application code is usually the least problematic performance-wise out of the entire system. So just wondering sort of if you've got any thoughts on that area. And, you know,
Well, Nick has the ability to turn on and off those third-party dependencies, so it depends what we want to look at. We can actually run it without those and just see pure performance, but we may want to see the impact that they have. I mean, we have a lot of... we have situations where we call third-party sites that if they fail, our page will fail. So we've got a single point of failure on a third-party site, which something we've highlighted as a great risk that we're trying to engineer out. We also have a lot of, as I said before, third-party sites which are being invoked before we get to document complete, before we get the site in such a state that the end user can actually use it properly. So we're putting plans in place to design it better and put that stuff at the bottom. So we have we need to test both ways, so we can turn it on and off as we need it.
are you finding that you're flagging up specific problems at the CI stage in application code that often?
Yeah, I go back. We're not failing builds on the CI stuff now. Nick's spinning up environments with builds and reporting back very quickly. If we were plugging into the build, the sort of metrics we'd have, we'd be failing a build a day.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Probably we'd be failing a build a day.
Out of how many builds per day?
20,
Depending on the project.
depending on the project.
5% failure rate.
5 to 20 depending on the project, but the developers do check in regularly. So yeah, so it's probably, I don't know. My view is you're getting a 5% failure rate, and so the build's failing one time in 20, and that's once a day. You're getting a failed build, but you've still got the build you had there before. You're still going to get the next build. That what you've done is you've stopped that particular problem getting into the code base until that developer's gone back and sorted it out. So the argument that it's going to be too disruptive, I can understand people can see that, but to me, it's not. It's protecting your code from performance issues, and over time, I expect to win that argument.
Thanks.
Andy?
Hi. One of the issues I've seen before is, and I'm not sure you run in Scrum teams.
Sort of.
Is
they think they are.
Yeah. Is the kind of
like the English rugby team.
Yeah, is the kind of issue of whether or not the performance is part of the definition of done of a user story. So, do you actually require the performance to meet some sort of standard in order to make the user story complete? What I've found is that you get a lot of resistance to that.
We don't really have that performance embedded that far into the process. We have Nick running the projects, picking up the stories, testing them. So the answer is no. It's something we want to move towards. We don't even have definition of done at the story level. We only have it at the sprint level. So, I mean, Channel 4 is a place I came into about a year and a half ago, which was iterative, agile, sort of using Scrum. I hadn't had a QA manager there for quite a while. A lot of stuff had sort of just decayed a little bit, so it's quite easy to get a lot of stuff back and working properly, but we're still ongoing trying to refine the processes and get all that stuff done. So, yeah, the short answer is no, we don't have that, but we will do.
Hi. What limits were you reaching with JMeter, and when did you decide that you had to transfer over to the Oliver Lloyd infrastructure service that he'd provided?
The moment we decided we wanted to be able to test any project at any time, we didn't have enough forecast licenses. We've got one internal forecast license for 100 users and an injector box, which is good for development work. We've got one forecast license tied to traffic spike with where we can do the high volume testing. We had 4 project teams. It's now reduced to 3. We had 4 project teams, all wanting to use that infrastructure. We didn't even have the development license until a week or so ago because they couldn't supply us with a controller box. So basically, we had one instance of forecast. We had 4 teams, typically releasing. Some teams releasing every 2 weeks. Some teams releasing every couple of months. Plus the development testing, all fighting over for that. And without any concept of CI testing, they were fighting to sort of get the license and prioritising and kicking people out because they did it. The moment we wanted to, if we'd had 2 projects wanted to do CI, we wouldn't have enough licenses.
Yeah. So what limit did you need the Oliver Lloyd stuff as opposed to JMeter?
JMeter itself on a single box is limited. Now, what numbers? JMeter on a single box is very limited. It depends on your scripts and your project as to what those limits are. But the thing with the EC2 solution is once you've got your JMeter script running on a box and you know how many users go on that box, you just spark up as many boxes as you want. Yeah, you horizontally scale. So you will hit a limit with a single JMeter instance on a box, depending on your hardware. If you want to do fully scalable performance testing with JMeter, you need some sort of scalability solution.
And do you know how different that is from BlazeMeter?
I haven't actually used BlazeMeter.
Right.
I did register.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've not got time to actually use their facility.
We looked at BlazeMeter first, and the reason we didn't use BlazeMeter, the reason we didn't, well, we had BlazeMeter as on the back burner, just in case. Even BlazeMeter, once you get to high volumes, gets very expensive.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we didn't use BlazeMeter.
So Perry, you got
Absolutely exactly the same point.
Okay. Yeah. I'll actually ask a question myself. You mentioned, I think, in one of the earlier slides, you seem to be alluding to looking under the covers, which I took to mean that you'd be using an APM solution like App Dynamics. Have you looked at any of the APM tools and integrating them into your process to look at a more granular transaction level from a code perspective?
We've actually got a development and a test Dynatrace license, and I've been challenging Nick to start looking into that, because that was used on projects. It's now sitting there as shelfware. So we've got that. We've also got Greylog, which is where we're getting a server and everything set up, which is an open source log analysis tool. So it's not quite the same thing. It will tell us a lot, but it won't actually give us the deep dive stuff. It's when you come to APM, or I'd call App Dynamics an APM tool. Dynatrace I'd call a profiler that can do APM. Once you get into those tooling, there doesn't seem to be an open source solution out there. So I think that's when you have to put your hand in your pocket. But we have Dynatrace. I think that when we used it before, it's proved very useful. So we'll be at some stage integrating that into the whole solution. As I say, I've been challenging Nick on that to get that integrated, but he's got a day job as well. That's the problem.
So yeah, I've been using App Dynamics a lot in load testing, and it's just been amazing what you can show the customer and say, that's where your problem is.
App Dynamics it appears to be a lot easier. Our operations people bought App Dynamics, and it appears to be a lot easier to just plug in and go with. It doesn't quite give you the drill down that Dynatrace does. So it depends. I think it's probably better for the production space, and probably Dynatrace is better for the development. Okay. But they're both really good.
And just one other question was, you talked about doing sort of transaction and scripting using the web page test scripting API, which I haven't used. How do you find that that's limited, and can you do the end-to-end kind of more if I'm thinking of, like, if you're an e-commerce environment that you really wanted to do that whole, search for a product, add to basket, checkout, that kind of stuff, where do you hit the limitations?
Well, Nick appears to be able to do that.
I've only done basic things, logging in, going to secure pages, but I don't see why it shouldn't keep going. They give you a scripting language, and it's a bit like web click and script type stuff that LoadRunner has. So it is click this button, enter this information. So it's not low-level stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it should be fine. Yeah.
So it's enough to do what you need to do without necessarily going over to WebDriver, Selenium or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, have a go. Have a look on my website, actually. And there's an example on there, so yeah.
Sorry, can I just... so on our team, we were using JMeter, and we found we had a problem with JMeter with an application redirect when you logged in. I know this is very specific. Is that the kind of thing you've encountered and got round, or do you know if that's sort of a known issue?
I'd have to look at your project.
Okay. I'm sorry, I know that's very specific, but I thought I would ask. Okay, thank you.
So back to Perry, I guess. Just put your hands up if you've got any questions, and we'll make sure that Mike gets them.
I think I just heard an answer to this, because I was going to ask which functional testing tool do you use, but I heard LoadRunner mentioned down the front, and as to whether that is actually integrated into the same CI process, or whether you keep it completely separate.
We don't use LoadRunner. LoadRunner is a load testing tool, and we don't use it. Nick's a LoadRunner fan, and he'd love to use it, but it's very expensive and we haven't bought it. In terms of functional testing, what we have, well, I'll tell you what we have. The most important type of testing of the lot, as far as I'm concerned, is unit testing. And one of the things that allowed me to go to Channel 4 and not firefight, even though a lot of stuff seemed to be broken, was the fact that we had a good level of unit test coverage and we had a good level of integration test coverage. So fundamentally, you could do nothing at all and the code was pretty robust and nothing much would break. So that
was using in-unit?
That's using JUnit. We're a J2E site, we're a Java site. So we've got JUnit there. That's in the developer space, but two of the teams are really good, really strong on that. One of the teams is getting up to speed on that, and they were the least important team in terms of the websites they were responsible for. So fundamentally, you need that, and you can't do CI without that, because they are the tests that run on every build, execute quickly, and give you the very, very quick pass-fail. In terms of what we have for more functional, I'd call it behavioural testing. On top of that, is we use BDD, so we capture our requirements using Gherkin. I don't know if you're aware of that. It's a BDD syntax. It basically you express your user stories that in order to achieve something as an actor on the system, I want this. This is what I want, and then you have your acceptance criteria, which, given I am I have a role, I am a editor or I am a user, and I am on this page, and certain state exists, like I am logged in or whatever. When I perform a certain behaviour, and you can and that or whatever, do several things, and you go then, and then you describe the result. So it's a way of specifying your requirements in a manner that can be understood by the business. They can understand it when the BAs take their ideas and put it into Gherkin. They can understand it, then they can pass it on to the developers and testers. They can understand it, they can develop to it, you can test to it. So everybody's working off the same thing. And you get certain tools that will consume that, things like Cucumber or JBehave or Script Runner, I think is that one. And they can take this Gherkin stuff and you have an automation framework on there. It creates what are called feature files for each of the acceptance criteria. And they're the things that at a high level, they're the tests that pass or fail. So on that, you can build models of your pages where you describe your pages in code form. You can have a blank. You have your feature files. You have your step definitions. That's why I got blank on that. So you have your step definitions, which is do the actual work. And there are tools now. There's a tool called Behave that plugs into Jira, where your BAs work with the dev. We always do collaborative development now. So the BAs work with the dev and QA to decide what the acceptance criteria should be that will prove that we're delivering what the business wants, and they can develop and test to. Behave will take that. They will put it into the Cucumber tool. There's we use in IntelliJ as our IDE. I've gone completely blank.
You need a beard.
Yeah. We use IntelliJ as our IDE. There's other IDEs that will do the same thing. But we've just upgraded to the higher level of IntelliJ because that will actually automatically create the step definition files. So what we then have is a situation where as soon as our BAs put the acceptance criteria in to our Jira, our tool, we will have a framework with feature files that if you run will fail. So then you can say, right, we've got failing tests here, and that story will be complete when all those tests go green, and then you have what's called acceptance test-driven development, and you can just see that your story is ready to be delivered and showcased because all those tests that were created when the BA created the acceptance criteria have all gone green. And in terms of any deeper level of automation, we have Selenium WebDriver underpinning this, and all the step definition and all that stuff are all tied together by Selenium WebDriver. And we can also use that if we wanted to do less behavioural functional testing, then we can use that without the Cucumber framework, or we can, we're looking at faking up acceptance criteria like make sure all the negative tests pass, and they don't mean anything, but they give you a structure to hang all that other selenium on, so you can report your results in one place. Yeah.
Just quick show of hands. Who else has still got questions? I'm just concerned about time. This is going to be the last question. One more to go. Okay, good. Mark. Okay, great.
Unless these spark some more.
I guess these spark some more. Well, it's the last one anyway.
Would you ever consider... Oh no, sorry, let me ask the first question and then that one will come after. So what do you do to maintain your performance baselines and make sure that they are optimized? What's the process that you use for that?
In what way? Do you mean protecting the code or actually having your pass-fail criteria in terms of...
Pass-fail criteria, so the baseline that you have today, would that necessarily be the same baseline that you would test against in a month's time, or would you try to optimize it?
What we tend to do is, if we're talking about real-world performance, we have a 95th percentile rule that all pages have to be ready to use within 3 seconds on the 95th percentile, and we also have 5% error rate or something like that, and that's our standard across the board. We can, if we're having particular problems with a page, then we could say, well, it's not a very important page, people don't use it, we'll let it through on this, but we'll flag it up as a warning and we'll look together. And a lot of pages, and a lot of our websites, quite honestly, don't match what our NFRs are anyway, so we then have to go and sign off. We typically have these at a certain user concurrency rate. We used to work on transactions per second, but we realised that was quite difficult when you're talking in terms of 3.5 million users watching a television programme, and there's a public announcement saying go to this website, and you get a 5% conversion rate. You have your load model set up with those journeys to do that. You just up the concurrency rate to that level, and then you see what your transactions per second are. It's a more realistic model. But yeah, I mean, we're actually in the process now of doing exactly what you say, which is trying to get all the pages down to the industry standard 3 seconds. A lot of it's changing the front end stuff. A lot of it is optimizing the queries that we've had in place for years and no one's actually ever looked at before. So we have a constant thing. And I don't know, if we get everything typically to 3 seconds at the required load rate, I'd still want it to be faster. So then I think it becomes a prioritisation call. Do you want it even faster and put the resources on that, or do you want to get this functionality or change the way this works or change the way this looks? It's just purely prioritisation. I mean, I think the thing that would drive that is a lot more you're seeing sites being compared against each other. And if they go, the BBC can do it in a second and a half, why can't you? Yeah. Say, okay, well, give us the time and we'll do it.
Yeah. The other question I had was around, so we're trying to do more BDD stuff and also trying to increase the profile of perf as well. Would you ever consider capturing perf requirements in a BDD style?
I hadn't really thought of it. What I found is you let people do some BDD and they can use it in a lot of inappropriate ways. Given I am on this web page, then I see this field here and this field here and this field's over here, and when I do that, and they try and describe page designs in Gherkin and stuff like that. So I'm very wary about how what you use it for. I mean, it should just be behavioural. I don't see any reason why you couldn't put an acceptance criteria around an NFR and express it in Gherkin. You obviously wouldn't then take it through to Cucumber to automate it. So if you were using a TDD and it was automated, you'd have a test that was going to fail unless you plugged in your performance testing in there to tell it that it passed. But I suppose you could write it in Gherkin, but I tend to say complex business rules, page designs wireframes should be wireframes. Complex business rules should be written in an English that is more natural, because otherwise it's going to be too long for anyone to read. And I would have thought probably performance stuff. I think you'd have an NFR section that you probably wouldn't write in Gherkin. Yeah.
Just a very quick question. How long did it take you to implement most of this stuff?
Not very long, actually. Surprisingly, I was expecting, Nick was doing it as a background task, and I was expecting it to take about 3 to 6 months. But you did it in about a month, didn't you? I don't know how much he was working at home, and I don't promise anyone else can do it in that time.
Yeah, some of the web page test stuff I started in my last place, and then the JMeter stuff is pretty basic, really, to be honest. So it didn't take that long.
Yeah, but it wasn't full time, as I say. It was while he was waiting for other work because people didn't deliver stuff on time, and I don't know how much he did on his own time, but I suspect it was quite a lot.
Yeah, I did do some of that. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, everybody, for coming along.